Welcome to TBR Gunworks. I'm Josh, and today we're going to do an out-of-the-box inspection on a Bergara B14 HMR. Hope you guys enjoy. Alright guys, before we get started, I wanted to let you guys know what this rifle is and why I have it. So, first of all, I bought this rifle with my own money. This is not sent or paid for by anybody else. And this is going to be a bit of a series going over this rifle over time. But today we're just doing an out-of-the-box inspection. I just want to let you know why I bought this rifle though. So I bought this as a beater hunting rifle because it is a sub $1,000 rifle with a decent barrel profile, a side bolt release versus a bottom bolt release on a 700. It's a very common stock pattern because it's a 700 clone. So your stock options for this are through the roof when it comes to replacing this someday. It's got an oversized bolt knob. It takes AICS magazines out of the box, and it's got a relatively good stock for what you're paying. For a sub $1,000 rifle, this is pretty good. But I want to do an out-of-the-box inspection to make sure there's no red flags that we want to catch before we actually start using this rifle. So, all we're going to need today is some Dicom, which is just layout fluid. You can use Sharpie if you don't have that. Some Climber headspace gauges. You can use the headspace gauge of your choice. More than likely, guys, this inspection is going to be done by a gunsmith that you take the rifle to, and it can be done on a brand new gun out of the box or a rifle that you bought used and you want to check it out before you use it. Now, this is my third time trying to film this video, so I already know we're going to need some lapping compound when we check the bolt lugs with the Dicom. Like I said, filmed it 3 times. I tried to do this in one take, didn't work out. We're also going to check firing pin protrusion with a homemade firing pin protrusion gauge. And we're going to use that in conjunction with a micrometer just to get an accurate reading on the firing pin protrusion. So let's come on over to the bench. I'll show you guys how we're going to start. All right guys, to start us off, we're going to take the bolt out of the receiver. This is a clear firearm. Look, double checking that. Take the mag out, don't need that. Now, before we check headspace, we're going to apply the Dicom layout fluid, or like I said, Sharpie. This is one thing you can check at home. You don't need to be a gunsmith to check the locking lug engagement. Let's see if I can show you guys. We're going to paint the back of this locking lug. You don't need a ton, guys, just enough to create a barrier. Let's see, come on now. There we go. Get good coverage on that. Now, we're going to put this back in the receiver, and we're going to get our headspace gauges ready. Well, let's let that dry off first. All right, these headspace gauges, these are from Climber. You can get them from Forster, Manson. There's actually a lot of companies that make headspace gauges. The Climbers are decent. I like these Climbers specifically because they have a cutout where you can line this up to where your extractor doesn't need to come out of the bolt and it won't damage this headspace gauge. Typically, if your headspace gauge does not have this cutout, you would take the extractor and the ejector out. As you can see over here, we already have the ejector out of the bolt. You don't want to put a bunch of steel that is interfacing with the bolt to interface with your headspace gauge, because any interference, any pushing action, or any clawing action can give you a false reading on your headspace, and you want to get as accurate of a reading as possible. This is the go gauge. It is 1.630, and this is the headspace gauge. It measures at 1.634, only a 4 thousandths difference between a go and a no-go. Now, the reason we're checking headspace is because we want to make sure that we're not too short of headspace, which can result in feeding issues, extraction issues, more importantly, safety issues with a spike in pressure or a catastrophic failure of the firearm. We also want to make sure we're not too long on headspace, which will directly result in poor accuracy and also safety issues. So now that this is probably dried, we're going to get that back into the firearm. Now remember, I am working from behind the camera, guys, so forgive me if I'm fumbling a bit over here. All right, this is the go gauge. We're going to make sure that this cutout lines up with the extractor. It's no longer interfering. We're going to get it, and we want to gently push down. We do not want to have to force it, but we do want it to be just a hair snug, just a little bit of resistance, because that's going to tell us that it's got a nice, not match grade, but a very tight chamber. We don't want it to be forced. So let's see. Yeah, that was perfect. Just a little bit of resistance, nothing serious. Like I said, I'm working from behind the camera. Oh, extractor wasn't perfectly lined up because it pulled it out of the chamber. So let's try to get that better lined up to make sure we're not interfering, not getting a false reading. There we go. There we go. All right. Yep. Same result. No issues. Now we're going to tilt this up. We want this headspace gauge to fall out with a little bump. And that's exactly what happened. Perfect. We'll grab our no-go gauge, and we do not want the bolt to close on this no-go gauge. That would indicate that the headspace is long and is unsafe. And typically, guys, the no-go gauge isn't unsafe as much as it is you're going to have accuracy issues. That's a hard stop. That's what we want to see. That is a hard stop right there. Very good. If it fails a field gauge, which most gunsmiths don't keep at hand, that's when you start to have, safety issues with the long headspace, because typically the field gauges are about 8 thousandths from the go gauge, so another 4 thousandths on top of the no-go. Let me get this boxed back up. There we go. All right, we're done with the headspace gauges. Now, we're going to run the bolt a couple times so we can get that reading on the locking surfaces. Where the bolt locking lugs interface with the receiver locking surfaces, we want as much contact as possible. Both for safety reasons, because these lugs are what are keeping the bolt from coming back into your body, but two, for accuracy. More importantly, with these locking surfaces, because even 50% contact on both lugs is still safe, but it's not accurate. There is a direct correlation between locking lug contact and accuracy. Why? We can go into that in a different video. That would take too long. But I do know, like I said, since I filmed this 3 times already, we're going to need the lapping compound. So let me see if I can get this camera to show you guys why. I need the better lighting. There we go. All right, so on this side, you know what? We put such a thick coating of Dykem on there that we're going to have to run this a couple more times. Now, let's see if this is going to do a better job of showing you. It is hard to tell because of the thick layer of Dykem. Let me get a pointing utensil. All right, so this would be better with this disassembled typically, and a dummy round in the chamber to push back on the bolt would be helpful, but we're not going that far, guys. All right, like I said, I've already got the results I understand, so I know where we have to go. So let's see if I can get this to show you. All right, so we've got wear here and up here, okay? And we do have wear here. It's just to a lesser extent because of that thicker layer of Dykem to wear through. On this side, I know you guys cannot possibly see that there's a difference, but the only place we're not getting good contact is up here. Everywhere else has worn off, just not all the way to the bare metal again. So like I said, if we ran this bolt a good number of times on top of what we've already done, we would finally get through the rest of that Dykem and we'd have bare metal to show you the difference. But we are going to use lapping compound to correct this issue and get as much contact as possible. You want to see between 75 to 90% contact. It's almost impossible to get 100% contact because then the bolt's not going to want to unlock because there's so much of that metal on metal contact. Now, that is important, guys. I would recommend doing this on all your rifles at home. Like I said, you can use a Sharpie, run the bolt as many times as you feel like running it, pull it out, and see how much contact you're making. If you're making 75 to 90%, I would be happy with it. If you're making 50% contact, I would highly recommend investing in some lapping compound. You can get 400 grit, 300 and something grit, 600 grit. Dealer's choice. How aggressive you want to go is up to you. How many times you want to run the bolt is up to you. However, if you're getting no contact on one side and a varying level of contact on the other side, then I would highly recommend calling the manufacturer of that firearm, because if you're getting all your contact on one lug and no contact on the other lug, you've got a serious issue, both for accuracy and safety. You want to have equal contact on both sides and as much as possible. So that's something you guys can do at home for free. And, oh yeah, next up, while we're here, we're going to use the homemade firearm pin protrusion gauge. This is perfectly flat. There's a pin on the inside. This screw holds the pin in, and when you push it up against the, when you push it up against the firing pin, it pushes the pin out, and you can get a reading with your depth micrometer. So this side's perfectly flat, and this side's perfectly flat. I know because I machined it myself. It's not pretty. I mean, this thing gets used and abused, and I don't care if it rusts at all. But the top is perfectly flat, and the bottom is perfectly flat. So we will get an accurate reading in combination with this and the depth micrometer. Looks like 41, give or take. All right, we're going to double check that with calipers just to get a 2 is 1, 1 is none situation going on. All right, overall length is 938. Let's get an accurate measurement. 938. Now we're going to flatten this sucker back out, back to 0. And we're going to take it again. That puts us at, if I remember correctly, oh, it's not 0, that's why. Let's do this. We'll loosen it all the way. That's right, it puts us at a 9 flat, 900 thousandths. So we got 39 to 40 thousandths of protrusion based on which tool we use to measure. It's not ideal, but like I said, the varying opinion on 700 firearm pin protrusion is all over the place. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave the firearm pin protrusion alone and see if it causes any issues in the near future. If we have light primer strikes, we'll know. If we have busted primers, we'll know, right? This was more or less just to show you that you could do it, but honestly, leave this one to the gunsmith as well, because most gunsmiths are going to have micrometers, calipers, firearm pin protrusion gauges, etc. Now, let's lap the bolt. I'm going to put some lapping compound on these locking surfaces, and we are going to lap this bolt, and I'll show you the final results when it's all finished up. All right, we've got lapping compound on both sides of the locking lugs. We're going to insert the bolt and run it over and over and over. Oop, got to recock this bolt. Now, this lapping compound is runny and will get everywhere, so you will have to clean your firearm when you're done, and you are not going to like how your hands feel when you're done. Now, typically, you would do this with slight pressure to the rear to pull those locking surfaces back to squeeze together more, because when there's an actual round in the chamber, it's got a little bit of rearward pressure because you're trying to squeeze it between the bolt face and the end of the chamber. So we would mimic that by pulling back slightly and getting that friction. All right, let's clean this off and take a look. All right, now you guys can see the wear patterns. All right, so that's about 90% coverage. You see the only thing that's not touching is that last corner. How about this side? Well, same thing. Only thing that is not touching was that last little corner. That's what we wanted to see. So like I said, guys, it wasn't a huge difference. It took only a few minutes to correct that. However, again, like I said, you are not going to correct major locking surface contact issues with lapping compound. You can correct slight issues where you just need to make it a little bit better, get it to where you're going to be more inherently accurate. And if you got safety issues, lapping compound is not the solution. That would be sending it back to the factory, or if that's not an option due to warranties being expired or companies no longer existing. Whoops, I am spilling lapping compound. Whoopsies. All right. Anyways, if that's not an option, guys, take it to a competent gunsmith They might be able to save it by cutting back your bolt lugs, and then most likely fixing headspace as well. Because if you've got to walk your locking lugs backwards, then you're going to change where your bolt face actually sits in relation to your chambering, meaning your headspace is going to get long. So it's a job, but if it's a gun you really want to keep and you want to make it right, it's worth doing, especially if you care about accuracy. Also, if you care about safety. Guys, I realized halfway through filming I didn't do the bore camera. All right, guys. So we have some styrofoam from packaging. We're going to try and pull that out right now. There we go. All right, so got very crisp rifling. We have some copper fouling from the testing at the factory. We expected to see all of that. We're not going to inspect every square inch of this bad boy. We're going to look at the highlights. So, like I said, rifling's very crisp. There is some fouling. We'll make sure we clean it up before we take it out of the range. I want to go see the transition from the throat to the rifling. Okay. That should be right. I know I'm trying to do both, guys. Forgive me. All right, this is a handheld. All right. So there's our transition from throat to rifling. And it's not perfect, but it's nowhere near the worst I've ever seen, nor would I consider this that bad. So I'm okay with that. We could clean that up in the future if we wanted to, with some very careful machining. Chamber's got a little bit of texture to it, which is okay. We're not mad about that. Don't want to see a complete mirror in the chamber anyways. And there's no major burrs on the mouth of the chamber. All right. So guys, this thing passes the bore camera test. Basic bore camera test. Nothing insane. It could be better on the machining end of the end of the rifling, or the beginning of the rifling, but it could be way, way worse, and our rifling is nice and crisp, and there's no major burrs. That's what we want to see. We can also tell, I mean, I can just tell you, I don't feel like, well, I guess I could move the gun. It's very hard to tell, but the recessed crown that they went with is in pretty good shape. There are no burrs on that as well, instead of you taking my word for it. All right, let's go do a recap. All right, guys. That's the end of the inspection. Headspace was perfect, right where we wanted to see it. Lock and surface contact was corrected, even though it was not that bad. I know it was hard to tell in the video, guys, but the first time I filmed it, it was very easy to see that we had about 75% contact, 70-75% on one lug, and about 80-85% on the other lug. So it was only a slight correction. We're looking good now, and I'm glad this filming, I didn't have any technical difficulties. So now I don't have to lap it a second time. Guys, I'm excited. This is going to be a good hunting rifle this year. I might take it to a PRS match after this hunting season, after I do some stuff to it. Maybe change the stock around. Who knows? I think for under $1,000, it's hard to complain about all the features you get on here. It is a production rifle. This is not custom or semi-custom, obviously. So you can't be expecting $5,000 rifle features and tolerances out of a sub $1,000 rifle. And if you're looking at me and saying, hey man, MSRP is way over $1,000, trust me guys, you can get this for underneath $1,000. I did. And I'm not going to say where because YouTube doesn't allow that, but there are places you can get this rifle for under $1,000. And I think that makes it a decent budget rifle. I know some people's idea of budget rifle is $300 to $400, but when you look at the quality control issues and the tolerances that you get at that $300 to $400 rifle range, it's bad. It's pretty rough. And then, like I said, for future later on in the future, you've got the issues of, not having many stock options for some of these rifles. The days of getting a 700 action and just building a rifle off of it on a budget is over, because 700 actions are now really expensive, because Remington went out of business and it is now Rem Arms rebranded. And that's a whole different video for a different day. But guys, this one's not bad. So we learned headspace was good. Lock and lugs needed to be touched up, and we did, and they're cleaned up now. We also learned firearm pin protrusion might be a little shy, but unless I've got incorrect data, which maybe, it's very hard to find accurate data on firearm pin protrusion, because you can find, I have found people saying, as machinists, saying as low as 26 thousandths and as high as 65 thousandths. We're at 39 to 42, depending on which measuring instrument we use. We'll see. We also looked down the bore scope, or down the bore with the bore camera, and found no major issues. There's some fouling, and the chamber to, throat to rifling transition isn't as smooth as it could be, but like I said, it's a production rifle. We're not going to see match grade finishing on the inside of this chamber and bore because it's not a custom rifle. It's not a semi-custom rifle either. So I'm pretty happy with what we've seen. I'll let you guys know in the future how the accuracy testing goes. And then hopefully you'll see some feedback from dropping deer with this thing this year. Forgot to mention at the very beginning of this was in 308 Winchester. Those headspace gauges we used were in 308. I apologize for waiting until the end of the video to say that. Guys, I hope you enjoyed. I hope this helps you do an inspection on your own rifles or know what to look for in the future. This is a pretty basic entry-level thing to do that you can have a gunsmith do for cheap, or like we said with the locking lug surfaces, some stuff you can do at home for very cheap. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Take care, and remember, every gun law is an infringement. I'll see you next time.